We're here with Scott Talks with Saket Soni. That's Saketsoni. And Saket is talking about it. I really just wanted you and Laura to keep talking about the stories in your book. But basically, it's a true story. It's a book called The Great Escape. It's a true story of forced labor camps and immigration dreams in America. It's so wild, man. I live in America, and I didn't understand that an event like Katrina could cause this type of injustice in the world, where immigrants are promised the American dream. The American dream is held as a bait, if you will, to bring people into America, and then they are imprisoned, basically, trapped in a situation they can't get out of. And then, you find out about this situation and decide you're going to do something about it. And I am totally fascinated. And the first thing I wanted to ask you was, how come you got the phone call from this gentleman?
Yeah.
So this is 2006, 2005?
2006.
Okay, 2006. You're in New Orleans at post-Katrina, and you're unaware of this situation completely at this time, right?
I was unaware of this situation, yeah. I was a young labor organizer, and I'd go to this place where laborers gathered every morning, the statue of Robert E. Lee, and I'd distribute flyers. The irony of that, right?
Yeah.
Hundreds of laborers gathered under a 60-foot tall monument of Robert E. Lee, and I was handing them flyers and business cards, and these workers from that hub of hiring would go out all over the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and they'd give flyers to other workers. So I bet what happened was that either my business card or one of those bright green or bright pink flyers that I would make, on my own on an almost broken down Xerox machine, got into the hands of one of these Indian workers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you come across these 500 men that are sort of, I don't know, were they brought together? Did they come together once they made it to America? But they've basically been brought here to help rebuild New Orleans after Katrina.
That's right. They were promised good jobs and green cards if they came and worked for a Mississippi oil rig builder.
Okay.
Signal International. So what they were promised was that they'd be rebuilding oil rigs that had been crippled by Hurricane Katrina.
And there were a lot of them at that time.
Oh, there were lots and lots of them.
Right.
This was a rising oil rig builder, a very, very lucrative company with enormous numbers of contracts, and they needed workers. And so this labor recruiter trio, a Mississippi police officer, a New Orleans immigration attorney, and a Mumbai-based Indian labor recruiter sold this company a scheme to traffic 500 workers.
Wow. I mean, that's mind-blowing. And these three men know the end result for these 500, right? Like, it's not like a secret between them that they're going to recruit these men and then they're going to deny them the very things that they promised these men as gifts for or compensation.
Well, the man right at the center of the plan is a liberal immigration attorney.
Yeah.
He's someone who considers himself the immigrant's best friend. He's an idealist. When he was a kid in Louisiana, actually, his parents took in a pair of Cuban refugees, and the dinner table conversations in English and Spanish, the halting ability that the family had to connect and make connections with these refugees gave this child a sense of purpose. He grew up and became an immigration attorney to help strivers who wanted to come to America. He knew the immigration system very deeply, and what he absolutely would have known is that the kinds of visas he brought these men in on never turn into green cards.
Right.
Never. These kinds of temporary visas, you cannot wave a magic wand and turn these into green cards. He knew that. He brought them in. The company, once they find out, that the workers have been brought in, having paid all this money, taken on the debt. They don't stop future workers from coming in. Workers are coming in waves. The company lets them in because they want the work to be done. Everybody benefits except the workers. And the way the workers were living 24 to a trailer behind a barbed wire fence was visible for everybody who touched the scheme.
I mean, the stories of eating frozen rice, and
that's
it's
all
just
they had.
mind-blowing.
Yeah.
All they had.
And the other thing that you brought up that I think is really shocking to me is just sort of all the things we take for granted here in the United States that, just working an 8-hour job, coming home to a family, coming to a home, our dreams around the world, and how it's used for immigrants and migrants as something to give up everything for. I think you said something like the goal for an Indian would be to be an American, like above many other things. Like that would be seen as such an accomplishment. Is that becoming more demystified through storytelling like this and through these types of exposures in the world?
It continues to be an aspiration. As tough as it is right now in America. I mean, people in all rungs of life are experiencing this sense of falling, slipping,
right,
becoming precarious with no net to catch you. Well, as much as that's true, it's also true that in many, many countries around the world, America is the place that you imagine you can live with the family you love and take care of them. What Ebi Raju said to me about migrant life, the rule of a migrant worker in India is you leave the ones you love to help them live. You express your love by separating from people you love so you can send money home from distant shores,
Wow.
And so the highest aspiration becomes spending time with the kids you love, with the family you love, while being able to provide for them. And that is just a luxury for so many people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It has to be, painted in a picture for me to remind me that, like, my kind of bad day is still somebody else's
Best
aspiration.
Day. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so well put, Scott. I so much of my work takes me into disaster zones after hurricanes and floods and fires. And one of the most profound things is to see that so many U.S.-born people, so many Americans, are becoming like migrant workers. A flood will destroy their house. They're living away from their family. They're trying to run around and provide. And the thing I always think about when I go to these places is very close to what you just said, that, wow, my worst day right now is better than your best day.
Mm-hmm. It's an aspiration for somebody else, right?
Yeah,
I would love to have your worst day, right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Remarkable. Go
Honey,
ahead.
can
I
I
know
jump in
Honey's
for a
itching.
second? I know.
Yeah, she's itching.
Well,
Go ahead.
there's
go ahead.
there's so many things, but yesterday I said that we were going to talk about Alvin Latner's a little bit today, and so, like, I feel like in the book, like, he's your nemesis. He's like the, remember Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? And then the
Yes.
guy in the white hat who kept showing up and tailing them. They're like, who is that guy? Like, he never lost the trail. He never gave up.
He's my guy.
He's
my hunter in a white hat.
Yes. And like I said yesterday, you humanize him for us by telling us his story. Can you just tell us a little bit about your experience with him without giving too much away?
Yes, I didn't know I was going to write about Alvin Latner. But the reason I started looking for him and then eventually writing about him was because I had gotten to the point in writing the book where I was recounting the death of my friendship with Rajan. And eventually, Rajan's own death. Tragically, while all these other men were getting reunited with their families. I'd be in airports and I'd watch rivers of fluttering saris, silk fabric, spouses walking through airports, being reunited, Ebby being reunited with his wife and child. But some of the workers didn't make it, and one of them, tragically, was Rajan. The campaign disintegrated. His friendship with me disintegrated. He turned at some point against the campaign. In a heartbreaking conversation, he explained to me that he and I were from different worlds in India. I had values and a sense of purpose, a fight in me, he said. He was a mercenary. He was willing to ally with anyone who would give him an answer. And I no longer had an answer for these men. So he told me that he had turned and he had allied with an ICE agent who was offering him legal status to help him bring down the campaign, to become an informant. And I pleaded with Rajan to rejoin me. Rajan didn't end up becoming an informant. He ended up, he was invited in return for a visa. Rajan, now 3 years undocumented and desperate, was invited that in return for a visa, all he had to do was make up false testimony about the workers and me, casting us as the criminals rather than the traffickers. Rajan didn't end up taking that deal. He flew back to India to be with his wife and to take care of his mother. But he warned me as a parting shot that I was, that this would be the end of the campaign, that many workers would do this. He didn't end up being right. We won. We won the right of these families to stay in the United States, be reunited with their families. But Rajan didn't make it. He died. And I thinking about it later, as I was writing, I put together that he really died of being home. He was a man who loved journeys. He loved being on the road. He loved cooking in Baku and Bahrain and walking to Washington. And being home just wasn't for him. I think he died of a broken heart. But I needed someone to blame. I was so torn up, so sorrowful about the death of my friend. I mean, one of the great platonic loves of my life. And I blamed this ICE agent, this immigration cop, who offered him that deal and who took it upon himself to bring down the campaign. This is an immigration cop who actually had corrupt ties with the company.
Yes.
And then appointed himself as the investigator of that company. Corruption through and through. This was a man I'd never met. This was a name to me throughout the 4 years. And his name was Alvin Ladner. And I decided to go find him. So I looked at every Ladner in Mississippi, and boy, there are a lot of them. It turned out that Alvin Ladner's, ancestor, the original Ladner, Christian Ladner, had arrived in Mississippi as an exiled convict from Europe in 1719.
Wow.
So I traced the family all the way back. I found a 900-page document in the Bay St. Louis Library called the Ladner Odyssey. I read the whole thing. Looking for that needle in a haystack, and I found my connection to my ICE agent, Alvin Ladner, and he was still alive, and his phone number was listed, and I found the historian who wrote this family history. I got an introduction from a trusted figure, and I convinced Alvin Ladner to meet with me. So at the end of the book, I tell the story of my journey to the steps of the Waveland, Mississippi Public Library, where I sat and had a 6-hour-long library footsteps summit with Alvin Ladner, where I took it upon myself to confront him with what he did to these men, own up to it, take responsibility for it. And to my surprise, I found a human being.
You did.
And, I tried to reconcile between my anger, but also my human need to connect with this human being. I mean, at the end of the day, I needed to understand why he did what he did, not just punish him for it, not just indict him for it, but understand what drove him, what motivations, what impulses. So I wrote about him the same way I would about any of these workers. And that was the overriding rule of writing this book was the immigrants were not perfect, and the bad guys had their own motivations and inclinations that we needed to understand so that we could, guard against this ever happening again. And so that was the project of writing Alvin Ladner's story.
I mean, I think one of the things that I'm just so happy about is how humanizing you give everyone in your book, in your story. Like you really bring us, into the families, into the feelings, even you're talking about food is I feel this other dimension about it. Like I'm hungry and I can see it.
I'm so glad, God. Scott. That is one of the greatest compliments I have received yet about this book. I dreamed of writing a book where someone would feel
hungry,
fulfilled in the soul, but really hungry.
Physically,
physically hungry.
But I think the thing that carries over to is the feelings and the sort of experiences of all the people that are involved. You do the same. It seems to be the same. I can't not see the good and the bad, right? There's just so much white or black in the world that I think that most of the situations like this have to be more complicated. There has to be more information to understand how people got where they are, to have compassion for them. And you seem to really be doing that for those of us who might want to just stand aside and be like, I don't know how this happened. It's a bad thing. Bad people are over here. Good people are there.
Right, it happens every day.
Yeah, it's much more complicated than that, and it seems to take someone like you to really give it that deeper view of it, and we're so glad.
We are so glad.
Well, thank you.
I mean, like I said yesterday, we could have talked forever. Our time is up now, and it went so fast, right, hon?
Yeah, it did. You guys, please check out the interview yesterday if you want more of this. Saket's book, again, is called The Great Escape. It's a true story of forced labor and immigration dreams in America. All his contact information is in the show notes. And we really appreciate your time, Saket. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Laura. What a pleasure to be with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.